So I'm Kelly Trout. I am the Director of Research and Medical Advocacy for the International WAGR Syndrome Association, and I'm going to give the patient summary on the session on WAGR Spectrum. I do not have any slides, so I'll just be speaking. This is the first time that WAGR has been given a whole session at the Aniridia Europe conference. And as parents and a patient organization, we are so appreciative of this opportunity. There is a glorious spirit of collaboration at this conference, and it just fills me with hope for the future. We really are stronger together. So the first presentation in our session was Overcoming Barriers and Accelerating Research, Lessons from the WAGR Syndrome Patient Registry. I spoke about how patient registries can help drive research forward and make better diagnosis and new treatments happen faster. The WAGR Syndrome Patient Registry is basically an online questionnaire that patients and parents fill out. They answer questions about their medical history, and these answers become the data that scientists can study. These answers lead to discoveries and breakthroughs. I spoke about the advances made possible by the WAGR Registry, including important new information about the conditions associated with this disorder. For example, we've learned that WAGR is far more than just Wilms tumor, aniridia, GU abnormalities, and a range of developmental delays. It's not fun to learn that your child is at risk for many additional conditions. Some of them, like chronic kidney failure, can be very serious. But it's extremely helpful to learn that you're not alone, that these conditions can be diagnosed earlier when they're more treatable. And this information is priceless. A registry is the key to getting it. Finally, I talked about the hope for an aniridia patient registry. There's no such thing right now, and there are a lot of challenges to creating one. But challenging is not the same as impossible. With all of us working together, I believe that one day soon, a global aniridia registry will be possible. The second presentation was given by Dr. Jennifer Kalish, a geneticist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Kalish's talk was Defining the WAGR Spectrum, Updates from the WAGR Syndrome Patient Registry. In other words, Dr. Kalish gave a demonstration of the power of a patient registry. She spoke about how her team studied the data in the registry and what that study accomplished. Their study gave the clearest picture yet of what WAGR Spectrum involves. Spectrum is a better way to describe how broad this disorder is. No one with WAGR has all of the conditions, and even within each of those conditions, the severity can be mild, moderate, or severe. So the term spectrum helps families and doctors to understand that every individual is different. The third presentation in our session was given by Jim Lauderdale from the University of Georgia. Consequences of PAX6 mutations in the brain and the endocrine system. Dr. Lauderdale spoke about how PAX6 affects parts of the body besides the eye. For example, people with aniridia often experience difficulty processing language. This is called auditory processing disorder, and it can have a big impact on a person's life. Children may struggle in school because they have trouble filtering out noises in the classroom. Adults may struggle because their brains have to work much harder in order to process what others are saying. These issues may be the result of differences in the structure of the brain, especially in areas where the two halves of the brain are joined together. Other problems in the brain may include a missing or smaller than normal pineal gland, which can cause problems with sleep, and a missing or smaller than normal olfactory bulb, which can cause the loss of the ability to smell. Also, people with aniridia caused by PAX6 mutations can have issues with their metabolism and with controlling their blood sugar, problems with the gastrointestinal tract, and possibly problems with the thyroid gland. Dr. Lauderdale showed that a lot has been learned about the effect of PAX6 mutations on systems of the body other than the eye, and that further study is really important to discovering not only what those problems are, but also what to do about them. The final presentation in our session was nephroblastomatosis in patients with WAGR syndrome and clinical consequences by Professor Dr. Norbert Graf of Saarland University in Germany. Less than 1% of all Wilms tumor cases in the world are related to WAGR syndrome, but 30% are related to aniridia. So screening is very important. If there is a child with aniridia, there must be genetic testing. If the child has a WT1 gene deletion, then screening is critical. If there is no deletion in the WT1 gene, then screening is not necessary. But the reason screening is so critical is because it allows for early diagnosis when the tumor is smaller in size and the outcome is likely to be much better. The age at diagnosis of Wilms tumor in kids with WAGR is earlier than in typical kids, and the tumor size, therefore, is smaller. If you compare screening to no screening, there's a big difference in the size of tumor at diagnosis. Screening should happen until at least the age of 7 or 8, because most tumors occur before that age. But if a child develops Wilms tumor, then follow-up must be lifelong. One of the reasons for this is the fact that kids with WAGR have special types of Wilms tumor. Half of them have nephrogenic rests, which are benign lesions in the kidney. These lesions can lead to Wilms tumor. Some kids with WAGR have many of these lesions, and that is difficult to treat and requires very close long-term follow-up. Tumor size also plays a very important role in outcome. So it's a good idea to treat with chemotherapy first, to decrease the size of the tumor, and to make the tumor easier to remove and allow more of the normal kidney tissue to be spared. 30% of all children with WAGR also have bilateral tumors or tumors in both kidneys at the time of diagnosis. So when there's a tumor on one side, there's a risk of developing a tumor on the other side as well. The good news is that children with WAGR who develop Wilms tumor are very likely to survive. But it is critical to have long-term, close follow-up afterwards because of the risk of late relapse and because the outcome of problems like kidney disease can be followed and diagnosed early. One reason the outcome is so beneficial is because kids with WAGR do not develop a particular highly malignant type of tumor called anaplasia. And they also rarely have Wilms tumor that spreads to other organs in the body. Finally, because of the spectrum of WAGR, these kids need a team of specialists, a multidisciplinary approach to medical care. And because of the rarity of this syndrome, we must have global efforts to share information and data. So again, thank you so much to Aniridia Europe for creating this wonderful opportunity to focus attention on WAGR Spectrum and to highlight the things that can be accomplished when we all work together. Thank you. Any questions? Over here.
Thank you, Kelly, for all your, the summary of all the speeches about WAGR syndrome. Well, I must say that it is, all this is thanks to the Spanish Aniridia Association, apart from Aniridia, as well as Aniridia Europe. But my question is, many of us feel that we have something more than Aniridia. For example, in my case, sleeping problems, stomach problems, for example. Mm-hmm. But how can we know, or how can you know in your studies, if it is a familiar issue when you see that maybe some of your relatives don't sleep well, for example, mm-hmm. or stomach issues because of the age, as you see that many others have it, or endocrine because, I don't know, to distinguish if it is a familiar issue mm-hmm. or it is related to Aniridia. And I would like to add that I liked a presentation, I don't remember, that from the last European Aniridia conference uh-huh. From London, that said that, I don't know if it was Dominic Premont-Guignac, I don't know, but I remember, but that it said that maybe having Aniridia doesn't mean that you have to have all these related conditions, mm-hmm. but that you have a more risk, a percentage of risk of having them.
Yes.
So this is my question.
That's a great question. And Jim Lauderdale spoke to that yesterday when he talked about how it may be a good idea to think of Aniridia as a spectrum disorder as well, because like WAGR syndrome, there are a wide range of possibilities, and every individual has their own set of conditions in addition to the eye. Some have few or none, and others have many. So it's difficult, and we certainly face this with the WAGR group because initially, when our organization first got together, as parents talked to each other, we realized that it was a lot more than W, A, G, and R. There were all these things that our children had in common. And suddenly, we were saying to our doctors, this isn't just my child. This isn't because his grandfather had chronic constipation, or it's not because of a family issue. Even though it's in the family, it's also very common in kids with WAGR. So it's part of the disorder. And the benefit of knowing that it's part of the disorder is that then you can begin to focus on why. What genetic basis is there for why this is part of this disorder? And focusing on that increases research, which leads to better treatments. So understanding the overarching idea that Aniridia, like WAGR, is a spectrum, that there are a variety of things that are associated with it, and as you say, you may have an increased risk, not an absolute, but an increased risk. And being aware of that risk can make it easier to understand.